to serving our host communities as they are. I'm trying to be careful about stating that because what I've heard us talking about being prepared for the demographic change as if that were a bad thing that we had to be prepared to manage, when really becoming, serving the students that are there is what we're all about. So that's number 2.
It's certain. I mean, how do you want to state that? I put words in your mouth there.
Serving the diversity of our host communities, or our core communities. And the third is sorry, how about that? Oh, the third is assessing. Are we as good as we think we are? And how do we assess them?
School or board?
School.
Okay. Ken?
So I have 3 as well. I would like us to commit to finding the resources to support a one-to-one initiative. I'm surprised that we don't have that. Maynard Schools has a one-to-one initiative at the high schools, and this has an important impact for kids who don't have access due to socioeconomic conditions to technology. And you know, in terms of digital literacy and a whole bunch of things, I think this is a critical thing. I'd like to see us do that.
Okay.
Number 2, I'd like to see us look at the 4 core towns, and in particular, I'm assuming Marlborough as a whole feels fairly well served by AMSA because so many from Marlborough come here.
Yeah.
And I would contrast this with Maynard, the town I come from, where so few are, and it's at a distance. I would like us to take a look at our core towns and what we should be doing to engage the core towns who we're supposed to be serving. And that's a little bit in support of what Chris was saying, but I think also different, because I don't know that we understand what our core towns are looking for. And then the third thing is I would like us to really look at gathering the resources to support, as Mary Ann and the teachers take a look at our foreign languages that we teach, I'd like us as a board to look at what resources need to be lined up to that, and some of that is financial, certainly, some of that is technological.
For foreign language?
I'm sorry?
For foreign language?
For foreign language.
Okay.
So those are my 3.
And so this would assess capability needs for expanded foreign language programs?
For whatever foreign language, I think that in order to support the kind of global initiatives that Marianne's talking about, in order for us to support the kind of foreign exchange programs, for example, I know she's looking at that, and there are real roadblocks for that. I'd like us as a board to consider what we need to do from policy, from financial resources and so forth to accommodate those things. I'd like us to see, what kind of policies do we need to put in place to allow kids to go overseas as part of the program,
Okay.
and so forth.
All right.
I have 2. The first is I would like us to focus on where are our kids going in terms of the college acceptances. I want to make sure that that's still primary and uppermost in our minds. We put out all of our scores and our ratings and our rankings, but overall college acceptances, however we support the guidance department with that and just ensuring that we are getting the students to where they want to go, that there's not this feeling of disappointment. And I get a lot of that feedback from students, from kids, their friends, that they not necessarily getting into the schools they want to be at. So
Yeah.
to me, that should be the number one strategic priority. How can we support the development of the guidance department, or whatever that means, to making sure that we've got the right colleges, the right admissions, people coming to our school, and supporting our students in getting into those high-level schools. And then the next priority would be to continue on with that, to make sure that they are getting into the right jobs. Moving forward from there, maybe some more of an outreach to all of the local companies. I mean, it is Massachusetts. We are engaged with all of these biotech companies, how to focus in on bringing that attention from them, so they're sort of tracking our students. So when they leave here and they go on to college, they've got their eyes on them, or some kind of cooperative program that would work with the companies.
How do,
How do we, I don't know how we support that, but that
how
would
do
be
you
something.
articulate that?
Say it in words.
Yeah, how do I write that down?
Yeah,
It's kind of two different things.
it is two different things.
Building
Building
longer-term
yeah.
relationships with industry in Massachusetts
Right,
versus,
that's
Is
what
it as
I
simple as you want to create experiential opportunities for students?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. Almost like a Northeastern, where they have a co-op program.
Can I ask a question? Do we think that, are we measuring, for our schools, or for us, is it important to measure what colleges they got into and what jobs they get into, or their success when they're in college, how they're doing? Are we preparing them for school, and are we preparing them for work, not necessarily where they're working and where they're going? I
did
think
you
that's,
want to add to the list?
I think we should consider that when we consider 7 and 8.
And I think that comes back to deciding what the heck our vision is at the end of the day.
I think Allison would suggest that making sure the kids are satisfied with what schools they're getting into is important. And we may disagree with that as a metric, but that's a metric that the kids certainly have in mind, and I'm guessing a lot of parents do as well.
Let's go to Tom.
So I'd go back up to the first one, I'd tweak it a little bit, but really just having the best faculty administration that we can have. So recruiting the right people, developing the right people, evaluating the people, and retaining the ones that we want to keep. That's a continuation of what number 1 from last year was, correct? And then I'd go with also continuing number 2 from last year, fulfilling the mission of changing demographic. It wasn't a complete cut and paste, because I think I had some tweaks to it, but I think it's a continuation of some of the same ideas there. And then fulfilling the mission of changing demographics. And we need to define what the mission is my number 3. We need to define it, we need to live it, we need to consistently communicate it, and then people are going to know what we stand for, and it's going to come back to that Amsa is not going to be right for everybody, but you're at least going to know what you're getting into.
Scott?
I would just like to expand on what Allison actually said. I'd like to get increase our partnerships with universities and industry in the area. And I think we're doing a good job right now, but
We got a long way to
we got a long way to go, and I think we can do more. And I think that's important.
Increase partnerships with industry.
Industry and universities. Or educational institutions, I should actually say, because not just universities. You could be learning from other schools and working with other schools on a partnership. Yeah.
Okay. Mary?
I think I just like the, kind of leads to the mission thing. I go back to the Disney model of simplification, where they just have something to make the magic. It doesn't matter what aspect of the organization you're in, everybody knows. It goes back to that simple, very simple statement. It defines everything and how you operate and how the culture. If your attitude isn't right, you can't make the magic for people. So if that's, if your mission can be that clear, your vision can be that clear, and then your statement that goes along to support that, how you're going to do it, I just really think it helps to draw people together and give them a commonality. Because when you have a lot of differences, right, what do you want to find? What do we all have in common? And I just goes back to the kids. And what magic is it gonna be for us to be able to make this the best experience and preparation for our students?
How do you capture that?
Make the magic.
Make
Like we
it-
steal Disney, I don't want a violation, but it's that concept of, it's about the kids.
Okay. Make it-
I hope no one's offended by that rather than the formal student term, but it's just that, it's about them.
We can fix that as we go. Any others to add? Melissa, did I not capture the one you asked for?
Oh, go ahead.
You're not? Go ahead.
I was
Melissa.
just gonna say, we keep on talking, I think we need to identify the metrics that measure success, that we are fulfilling our mission. A lot of these might be the metrics that measure that success. That's just kind of what I was thinking. There's a lot of things that we can be looking at. I don't know if it's, each one of these is a goal or a priority, but do they all fall into meeting what we set out to do within the mission?
Okay. Pauline?
Yeah, I had two actually, and this was useful for me to think back on why I joined the board, and the whole reason that I joined the board actually has nothing to do, clearly, was because in my professional environment, the biggest thing that I have seen, and I've worked in biotech my whole career, there's so many highly trained scientific PhDs who do not know how to collaborate and work together. And so workforce skills to me that involves sort of understanding the big picture and understanding how to work together is really critical, because I think the rest of our educational system just trains people to be technical experts. And so sort of laying that broad foundation is so critical. That's what makes biotech companies succeed.
So you're saying ensuring that collaboration is...
It's just a huge skill that isn't taught anywhere else in the educational spectrum. And if we can get it to them in middle school and high school, it will set them up for leadership positions in the future, 30 years down the road.
It's measuring success. in the
That's one
workplace.
big thing for me. And then the other one was actually, we are a charter school, and I don't want us to lose sight of the fact, and we're a charter school focused on STEM, that we should continually be focused on educational innovation in STEM. We should just be trying new things, measuring them, seeing if they work, and, throwing them out if they don't, but they're just, we got to do that because we're a charter school. Otherwise, your kids can just go to like some other nice
Great
high-performing school district. Exactly.
We have a couple... Oh, Roger, you had not.
I think a lot of hit by other people, but corporate / university / other learning institution engagement. I think we have lots that we can do there.
And is that the same as...
I think it's been captured.
Okay.
From Scott and others. Second on the list is to support new and innovative education initiatives by the staff. And the third one, which has also been hit on indirectly, but I think as a goal for the board, is to support alumni development, to be able to track our alumni into college and into the workforce, assist them in getting jobs, find out are they successful, get their feedback. We've got 4 graduating classes.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's not the school they go to or the job they're in. It's, are they successful at each of those steps? Have we given them the tools at each of those steps? Because you can have a student that goes to Yale and a student that goes to Northeastern and a student that goes to UMass, and the UMass student might be more successful than the student at Yale. So I don't want to base it off where they are, but are we giving them the tools to be prepared wherever they go? That's from my own perspective.
For me, it's being an engineer, asking the question, well, what could we have done better? What things, use that feedback loop to help the students improve our process so that we can make our students even more successful.
Okay.
Learn from them and help them. I think there's also the aspect of being able to help them to say, oh, alumni association, there's 100 jobs in this company. FYI, you might be interested in them, or allow the alumni to communicate with each other so they can
Pretty
apply
impressive
for
that
corporate
how many
life.
came back for the Back to the Future, 30, 40 of them? It's amazing.
That is a testament of success.
It was a night where the alumni came back to the school and kind of shared with everybody experience.
And during the day,
Yeah,
presented
it's
to
not
our
just
students
the-
as well.
So, yeah.
both for the parents and for the students during the day.
So that's our list.
Rick, Scott.
I had done a pass if I can.
Oh,
use
you
that.
did a pass.
So just to confirm, strategic priority nominations are ideally things that are long-term.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're kind of a reiteration of stuff, but I'm just maybe doing them a little differently or modified. So people talk about college readiness and career readiness, right, for the 21st century. So coming back to college readiness, are we getting them into the right colleges, but are we getting them really prepared? Just to share with folks studies that have been done, high-performing high school students, about 50% of them after the first year of college are low-performing college students. It's dramatic. Not where you see 97%, way above 3.0 GPAs, 37% above 4.0 GPAs, half of them are going to be averaging a 2.6 GPA when they're in college after the first year.
Do we know why, Rick?
One of the biggest issues is some of those soft skills. It's self-discipline, self-management skills. It's the number one issue. There are a series of other ones. Then once they get into the career, a big problem is collaboration and those skills. So the first thing I think we need to figure out is how do we get that whole big picture of are we getting them truly ready for college? Not accepted, just accepted, but ready. And the second is, are they actually ready for the workforce? Figure out once they get in, what was missing. Colleges may not be able to support everything, or they need to start learning certain things like collaboration, et cetera, earlier, and are we supporting them in those places? So that's number two. And then third, I think what you mentioned about making the magic, I don't know what the right word is, but that's coming back to culture, right? When everybody is is marching to that same drum beat, that's one aspect to it, and there's that magic, there's an aura of what we're all focused on. It sometimes helps break down those walls of factions and everything else. It keeps us continually focused on it's about this student, and sometimes you have a mantra around it, whether it's making magic or whatever it is, so people just keep pointing back to that. When there's sometimes conflict or there are disagreements, you always come back to that simple statement, and it helps people focus. Oh, let's stop bickering about this. Let's get back to
That's
what we need
what,
to focus on.
Big, hairy, audacious goals.
Yeah.
Nike's mantra for over 10 years was kill Adidas. Everybody that worked for the marketing corporation known as Nike knew that was their only challenge, was to kill, and they used stronger words, but kill Adidas. Brought it back to the mission, so anyway. So we've got 18 things here. I think these are very
Thank you for sharing.
inspiring,
Very
and
insightful.
I think we can certainly shovel these into strategic planning as soon as we get there. So now, if we want to come back to, I think the portfolio view is a nice way to think about things. We've got
I
been
sent it to you so you can
nothing on
project
the
it.
board. Let me just save these.
It was specific to STEM.
Okay. Do people need a couple minute break or?
Yes.
Yep, okay. Coffee's sitting in. Let's take 5 minutes, come back, and I think what we're going to try to do is take the goals that are the activities that we nominated on the board previously, and really what we'll do is everybody will get 3 votes to nominate their top 3. We'll count them up, force rank them, and then figure out which ones we want to tackle. We still need to define what they exactly mean in terms of measurable goals, but we have themes, and I think that's important.
Could I make one suggestion? In terms of that, when you look at some of those goals, some of those actually may be buckets in a portfolio.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think maybe looking at how do we want our portfolio to be set up in view of what those goals are,
All right.
it might make the exercise a little bit easier in terms of prioritization and so forth.
Some of them are main objectives, and some of them are enabling objectives.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we'll start with that then. Rick, can exactly. So we have 35 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. And a fee, you know, at
Till the end of the
so
meeting.
we're gonna sign up for it, but then like, we have like 2 months period of time. So what would that? You're really learning that,
We're going to end at noon.
right?
We're going to try.
You
I think
to at
we
least
can get up.
present. probably
I don't
just
mind,
like the
I mean,
last.
this,
Okay.
Yes.
this
How are you
exercise
doing?
here is really important to get around to
We missed you this morning. Your system because it.
All right, I'll cut that off.
Other things, but yes, I think so. Yes, okay.
Okay, so Rick's suggestion that we try to move towards a portfolio and view of how we spend our time on different categories of issues is what he's going to try to help us to get to a clear picture of now. But I do think at some point we're going to all get 3 votes on all of the top 7 or 8 issues, and then figure out which we think as a board are the most important ones to spend time on.
So how long do you want to keep this?
Rick, how long do we to get to an idea of the portfolio?
So maybe, can I take 2 minutes to explain what I would propose as the exercise or the nature of the exercise, and then we can just give a judgment of how long we think.
Okay.
So the idea is this, that we want to create a portfolio view of what we want to focus on for years to come. And the most important exercise in this portfolio view is to come up with what are the major buckets you're going to deal with. So theoretically, one bucket could be college readiness, another could be culture or transparency, or another could be whatever. And then within each major bucket, you will have specific items that you are going to address within that major bucket. The big thing is first to get those major buckets right, because if you get them right, you can carry them year over year after year. And secondly, once you get your buckets, before you start filling things in the bucket, ideally, we as a group should say how much percentage-wise of our resources do we want to allocate to dealing with that. And you want to do that before you start filling in items, because otherwise you'll be tempted to allocate more time to a bucket which has a lot of items, which is probably not what you should be doing, right? You should be allocating effort to a bucket because it's actually important.
And does the allocation change over time?
Maybe in 6 months or a year when we revisit it, we may change it. But ideally, you shouldn't be changing it as the year proceeds, because then it acts as a guardrail that as new issues arise that we don't expect, and it falls in a certain bucket, we can push down other items and not address them this year, because we've committed to only spending 50% of our time on a certain bucket or 25% of our time on a certain bucket. Does that approach make sense?
It may be a
Are the
little
buckets for
overly-
1 year or multi-year?
They're multi-year. This is our portfolio. So just like when you're investing, you say every year, I anticipate for the next 5 years, I'm going to put 50% of my investments in conservative instruments and 25% in growth and 5% in highly aggressive. All right? And I'm going to do that pretty much every year. Maybe I'll tweak it a little bit year by year, those major buckets, but that's what I'm going to be focusing on in a given year. What's in my portfolio of growth investments might change. I might be investing in this stock or this mutual fund or whatever.
It just may be a little overly complicated for this exercise. We have 3-4 buckets, and we allocate percentage of time. Are we going to kind of measure percentage of time the board spends?
Well,
So can we do an example? I mean, it might help if we, so I think like, sort of expanding and clarifying the vision statement, the vision for our success was one of them. How might would that be a bucket?
Oh, I have an idea.
So I'm sorry.
I actually have an idea on what we could do for the big buckets, because I think some of these may fall into it. So I really think that the big buckets should be what we're tasked with as a board, which are the 3 things: organizational viability, academic success, and faithfulness to the charter. And then almost like that, clarifying the vision is an action that we want to take in this year that goes under faithfulness to charter. Some of the culture things goes under organizational viability. We really shouldn't be doing anything that isn't in one of those 3 things.
So just kind of stepwise, I think the first exercise is let's agree on what those big buckets are.
Yeah.
And then the second is what should we allocate in terms of effort to those over the year.
Yeah.
And then the third exercise is putting items in those buckets and then ranking them within
Some
any
of
given
the
bucket.
1 through 8, 1 through 6 are either categories or they're items.
Correct. Or even for any of for any of this stuff.
Shouldn't 3 step 3 and 2 be reversed?
no one's
Should
gonna,
you list them so
well,
you
actually,
can
that was Michael
see
last week.
how much time you would want to allocate?
No, because what happens is people, what they wind up doing, see, if
That's the whole reason he's advocating for this.
that's why you
approach.
want to have a portfolio. It's just like if you get really excited in the stock market about all these aggressive growth companies, well, you might start investing 50% of your money in that. And you don't want to. You only want to spend 5% on really aggressive or risky stuff, right? Same way here. We want to spend most of our time on those big buckets we believe we as a board should be focused on. And we might have 100 tasks. We can't address all of those. We will only now focus on the top 3. So that we have enough time for legal, if legal is a bucket, and whatever, or whatever, operations, if
Look,
operations.
we maybe throw out some ideas of just starting to get some of those categories. I mean, wouldn't that be
That's
helpful?
step
Because then
one.
it'd start to go, right?
Yep,
So how about something like fundraising, right? I mean, would that be a bucket or a category, whatever you want to call it?
I would argue there, so is there even a bigger bucket that, I don't know.
Organizational
Yeah.
viability is
Yeah,
the bigger
so
bucket.
is there something that's,
That's fine.
for lack of a better word, I'm just calling operational, like there's legal, there's fundraising, is that one bigger bucket?
No, I think
What
organizational
about,
viability.
Pauline's point about, why don't we start with 3?
Yeah.
Sure. Actually, Pauline, do you mind? Okay, I'll do this. My handwriting is terrible, so hopefully.
I
So-
can't even read my own
so-
handwriting.
So, I'm sorry, what was the
Pauline,
first
would
one?
you repeat the 3?
Organizational.
Yeah, the 3, organizational viability,
Or viability, okay.
Academics.
academic success,
Faithfulness to charter.
faithfulness to charter. Yeah. Those are really the 3 big buckets.
Faithfulness to the charter.
Which is really faithfulness to whatever we determine our new vision and mission to be.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I would take the word charter out.
Okay.
Because
Well,
we agree that
the
this-
charter is, that's in our charter. What's wrong with using the language?
The mission's the charter, I mean, the mission's in the charter, how big,
I think it's because of the
Our-
preliminary
our-
conversation we had about trying to
It's a little-
define it.
it's
So
very-
faithfulness to the charter, if we think of the charter as the license,
Yeah, it's a license.
right, then we can say we're having faithfulness to being able to retain our license as a school.
Well, that would be
Then we're gonna-
organizational viability.
Then we define that and
Okay, so-
educate people. It's an educational process, that's fine. But this way, we can sit there and anchor the buckets in fact, I think the Elaine's point is, we anchor that in what our role is. That's our specific role.
Actually, maybe faithful, it might be actually faithfulness to mission.
No,
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
charter.
charter.
It's
charter.
It's
Well,
charter.
this
the
is,
chart-
I mean, this is part of the, this is
I
building
think
the
we can come
accountability
back to
unit,
label.
right?
Okay, let's come back to label that. We agree on what it
We
means.
agree the concept, we don't know.
Yeah.
Are there any, okay, so that's where we're starting with. Are there other things that are, I guess, big buckets? Or do we need to split any of these out?
I think they are, there's
I
things
think
that fall
they're
within them.
too big. I think we maybe, like, for example, one of the categories that Rick and I came up when we were discussing this was operational items, where we are grouping all the legal actions and the charter renewal.
Now, those are
But that's under
viability.
organizational viability, yep.
So that's
But-
getting
but,
very big, yeah.
But, okay, but I'm worried, okay, let's go with it.
So I agree they are, but I think you might want to split it up, because this is getting, you want actually more than just 3 buckets, because it's going to help you prioritize as the year proceeds. So if you can split some of these into 2, or there's another way to do it, it'll be wind up being
So you can
helpful.
maybe,
what's it
like,
called?
organizational viability could be split
You know,
between
6
short-term and long-term.
6 around 6, 7.
All
What's
right,
that?
so we should split each one of those into 2.
No,
Okay.
because I think we had more than 6.
So one could be board operations. Or
I'm sorry, board operations.
But everything we're doing is board operations.
So
I think it should fall in those 3 things too. I think we should simplify them. Those are good starting points.
So they are good starting points, but if you don't have a few more, and maybe even just split these out where they can be split out, it won't be as effective.
Let's maintain them as headers.
What about long-term and short-term? So those 3, but then short-term of those 3, and then long-term, because we may be able to cover everything within the difference.
So Rick,
Short-term
your
and
statement
long-term.
might be right, but let's go with those 3, and if in the end, there are other ones, then it'll prove out as we move forward. I don't know that we have to define this right now. We're sort of learning collectively how to go.
Okay, so I would just throw this out. The reason if you can break these out now, it would be helpful is because before we start filling things in here, we as a board should think about how do we want to spend our time among them.
But Rick, when I look at number one, I want to spend as little as is humanly possible to knock off everything in number one. That's what my goal is. I don't know how much effort that is going to require. That may become all-consuming if the lawsuit over the real estate heats up and Craig has to testify, and whoever else has to testify. I don't know what that number is at this point in time.
Are there other things that are going to keep coming up? Or other things that fall in this category that are that are discretionary? Because ultimately, right, the value of a portfolio is you can, there's certain things that are going to be non-discretionary.
Right,
You don't have a
and
choice.
I just want to get that point across. So I like the portfolio concept that you have introduced here. I like that concept. I just want to come out on record. We're going to spend exactly what we need to spend on legal in terms of bandwidth, hard-earned green dollars. We'll spend what we need to spend. I can't tell you what that's going to be at this point.
Well, we'll do our
We
best
shouldn't
guess.
spend any more than we need to.
Agreed, but let's take our best guess. I mean, just in terms of board time, because then we know how we
10%.
can. What's that?
10%.
But before, are we saying we can't drill these down any further?
No,
I'm saying on number one. That was
Okay.
on
Saying
number
legal.
one.
Legal toward
So,
underneath
I
organizational.
think what I would offer is that if we do have to drill down, that as we collectively, Rick, you've gone through this before, obviously. The rest of us have not. So the point is let's go through the process and start to fit things in. And as we exercise new muscles in this, then your clarity, which you already have, will come out to the rest of us.
Alternative proposal is that we take each of those three and divide them into two, which gives us 6 categories. And from there, proceed as Kenny suggests.
So can we try that? Can we try to split these?
What?
If they can be, and if they can't be, we'll keep them as is.
Help us with one of them.
So, academic success. There is academics, this is hypothetical, academic success while you're in school, things you can do while we can currently modify, and then there's the stuff that's related to
Success in college,
success in
life.
college and
Success in
success
life.
in career. Yeah.
That's after
Okay.
I guess what I'm coming back to is, are we creating this chart to help us drive to what we're doing for the next annual year? Or are we creating this chart to drive to a strategic plan? I think this is actually a really good tool for both, but where
It is.
you're going is more strategic
Yeah,
long-term.
and I think we got
And
a
I
couple
think
of
those 6 items to the left is where we were talking about focusing for annual. So which one are we doing at this point?
It's actually both.
I don't know that we can do both.
Well, okay. So
Percentages may change.
this is a portfolio of how you're going to be spending your time over the next year. But it's a model of how you're going to be spending it over multiple years too.
Where the
Okay.
percentages may change.
Percentages may alter. But so as you put items in here, some of them are addressing what you're trying to achieve right now within the year. But some of it is also, you're going to spend some time or some effort for those long-term
Because
goals.
a bunch of these on the board, which we think are strategic, need to fit into there. So I would say
That's
academic success is the one that's within Amsacs. If you want to create another one, you should say life success, which includes college and beyond.
So college and career is really,
College and
That's-
career.
I mean, that's what you hope.
So just one other thought, it's sort of been touched on before, but if we just took those buckets and made them into short-term, meaning over the next 12 months, long-term, beyond the next 12 months, then we're still putting the various line items in the same bucket category. It's just that we're going to say there might be 1 or 2 items that we need to address in the next 12 months. Several other items, we know those are 2, 3, 4 years out. So just a thought, another way to divide up the buckets and not necessarily change the category title.
So if I understood you correct, are you saying those items can still fit into the same bucket?
Short and long.
Yes,
he said.
that is
Short and
correct.
long-term.
That is correct, yes.
Well, I would
major
add
name.
one.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you
No,
off.
go ahead.
Faithfulness to charter, I think, is one, and we'll argue whether that's vision or
Yeah.
charter. I think you could also create create a bucket, which is innovation and dissemination, if I could put both of those in the same bucket. They're very different,
But
but
it
I
is
think
part
that,
of your faithfulness to the charter, because one of, I mean.
So is
one
that,
of the-
is that
the
part of
things that
that
you do
bucket or is that a
no,
separate
it's
bucket?
separate. I'd say it's separate.
We can, for the purpose of the exercise, unless anybody has an objection, we can separate them out. And there's that, to your point, we're gonna go through this and then we might have to,
I'm working on one more bucket. Who wants to speak to it? And then we can go on to putting things in buckets.
anybody? Nobody's speaking out. Greg, you wanna?
Go, Craig, go.
I think that the one that we don't have in there at all is our investment in culture. So I don't know what we.
Organizational viability.
No, well, I think it's a subcategory.
How
I think
about
it's a
board,
subcategory.
how about board development? I'm not sure whether that, is that part of organizational viability?
Yeah.
It's a very small subset, I think.
So both of those are subsets, but do we wanna break one out? Or both? I mean,
So, I would say yes, we want to break out board development. It may not have a big piece, but it's going to have a piece, and it's got a piece that's going to be budgeted. Yes.
Okay.
So, shall we start with these?
I don't see where investment in culture.
So I think organizational viability, the problem that I'm having, and I understand what Tom was saying, the piece that Tom wants to do, I think agree should be 10%, but there's more of that has to be more, like maybe the culture goes under there. I think under organizational viability, there's the absolute basic, that we've got the money,
the
we've
lights
got
on.
the legal, the governance. That's the 10%.
Right.
And then organizational viability, culture kind of falls under organizational viability, that may be a different percentage.
Okay.
But the keep the lights on
Yeah.
is the 10%.
So do we split it into,
Like discretionary,
I
non-discretionary?
think Molly's suggesting just remove the 10% for now.
Yeah.
or, I
we
think
may
you were
have to
saying,
split.
yeah,
Split
discretionary,
organization.
Yeah, like
non-discretionary.
discretionary, non-discretionary.
Yeah.
If there's-
Or
that's a good
viability,
point, yeah.
discretionary,
Because the 10% should be the discretionary to keep the
or
lights on.
viability.
It's non-discretionary.
Oh, sorry.
Right, you have to have that. Yeah, we gotta have the lights.
That's an outside person.
We gotta have the lights, okay.
That's the difference between the chair of the finance committee and the participant.
Yeah.
I actually think it's a good distinction.
No, I think it is a good, yeah, I agree.
We
It's just
succeed
right
very,
now,
we do very
we
well.
do very well on one and not the other.
So that's the magic number, right? So just to confirm, we've got organizational viability, discretionary, org viability, non-discretionary, AMSA academic success, post-AMSA college and career success, faithfulness to charter, innovation and dissemination, and board development. Yes?
So if they all had equal weights, they'd all get 12%.
15%, whatever.
100 divided by 7. I'm a history teacher.
But they don't, or maybe they shouldn't.
They should.
For this coming year, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what we should think about it.
Yeah.
It's easier to think about it as for this coming year
Yeah.
than for the next 5 years.
And this is our first year doing it also.
So I think one to knock off is college and career success, 5%. Because I think it's really important,
year.
but we don't have time to do it this year as a board, to invest heavily in that. So I'm just trying to take one off as a high priority.
I nominate board development at 5%.
I agree.
I think we're in a pretty good space, we got some plans in action.
Is board development getting new members or?
Yes.
And running well as a board, and
Okay.
committees work and comply with law.
Education, yeah.
I agree.
So where does culture fit?
Organizational viability.
Discretionary?
Discretionary.
Discretionary.
You know what I'd say.
Right.
Speech earlier, 50%.
I was gonna say that, it needs to be where we are.
50%?
I'm just gonna, I think it's an awfully high percentage,
I
but I'm
agree.
just.
Wait, is this for the board? Yes.
Yes.
The
This
board's
is our,
labor.
this is
Our
our,
labor for
Our
their
time.
That's
an awful lot.
I know it is, that's why.
So I'm putting it up
Are
there.
you
I
identifying
disagree
with
with
culture
that.
underneath that?
Yeah.
Put 50%, are you
Yes.
identifying culture?
Discretionary comes
Okay.
in organization.
Yeah,
All right,
culture is
we
one
can
thing
do it
that
with
would
a
fit under that.
Like, header so we know what we're saying?
So it's Pauline's code word. We have to go with her code
Discretionary
word.
equals culture?
Well, discretionary means you can do it or
That's what
you don't have to do it. Whereas legal, you don't have a choice.
So maybe
we
it's less
thought
than
that
50
the
for sure, but
required
it's-
aspect, the non-discretionary part was 10%. I know in reality it is,
It may be more though,
it-
because
it's.
It is whatever it
it
comes.
is
It is
whatever
whatever
becomes.
it becomes,
It comes,
but we're
but-
guessing 10%.
Okay, with a guess.
Like your snow plowing budget.
Yeah.
70 or 70%.
Well, no, it's not like a Massachusetts school polite budget. It's like a
So just pick off another low one and give it a number.
But we have 30% to go.
No,
Well, we're
No,
gonna,
we're not.
we're gonna get more.
We're not getting-
We're all agreeing that 50%?
No, no.
Not yet.
No,
We're
no,
not
no.
agreeing, but that was a placeholder put in.
Yeah, it's a placeholder. These are number one thing.
So I will counter propose that at least as much should be spent on faithfulness to the charter, because that's about articulating what our mission is, so at least as much effort should be spent there.
Of the board?
Yeah, but
Yes.
that goes back to, are we talking about a statement, or are we talking about?
Clarifying where we're going.
Okay, spending time thinking about that, working on that.
I think it should be half of these.
Okay, so, well, this obviously can't stay at 50, but do folks agree that that will take that should take as much time and resources?
25.
How about this?
25.
How about high, medium, low? Would that help?
No, let's go with numbers. Let's
It'll force you to think if you use
25%.
numbers. So 25, 25, is that what people are saying?
Yeah.
What's that, the one you just wrote in?
Organizational viability.
Or viability, discretionary faithfulness to charter. I gave the warning ahead of time. My brain is terrible. Unimportant.
It's also small, so.
Well,
Yes, it is.
you know what we can do, once we get this down, I don't know if somebody may be able to put this in PowerPoint, because then we can start typing in those other
When it
items.
looks organized, I'll start typing in a thing, but
Okay.
what, can I ask, where would, the lease, school, what would that fall under? Is that gonna be,
Organizational liability, non-discretionary.
Non-discretionary. Because if we don't have a choice, we've got to deal with it. Okay, so we still, the last two items we have are innovation and dissemination and board just innovation and dissemination and academic science.
And how many percentages do we have left?
We have 30.
I'd like to put,
40.
at least 20% each in academic success and innovation and dissemination.
Okay, we don't have.
I know.
So I'm gonna put 15, but you can change something, recommend changing something. Well, let me just do it for the moment, okay, and then we can have a conversation. So, because now we're all filled, right?
So Roger, if you had to choose, if you could only do one of those this year, which one of those would you focus on this year? Because I think I know the answer for that.
I would favor innovation and dissemination over, well, I think I'm struggling with definitions a little bit. I would favor innovation and dissemination for my definition.
Especially as a board function, like, does the academic success, how much of that is board driven and how much of that is?
It's being involved and understanding how academic success is measured. And I think that if you put 20 in innovation and dissemination, I feel that 20 is fallen in academic success because measuring our success is measuring that college and career. So I see that being the same thing.
Also, doesn't innovation lead to academic success? Like, isn't that the whole point?
I'm sorry, does it?
Doesn't innovation lead to academic success?
Not necessarily.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
Well,
because
I-
remember, innovation and dissemination, I mean, so if you look at kind of risk, there's risk in the innovation piece,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And that's
Some of
why
it's gonna be
you
wrong.
say I'm only gonna spend so much on it, because some of this innovation is gonna fail.
So part of the problem here is like things like innovation, our role as a board is going to be very light in that. I mean, clearly, the teachers are going to have a very heavy role in that. Ours is going to be very light. So innovation might be very, very, very important to us, but our role in that as a board is going to be very small, all right? I mean, this is the reason why I'm having an extremely difficult time with this whole percentage thing, is because we're sitting here throwing numbers out there, and I feel like throwing 17 in there just to have a different kind of number up there. When I would rather us talk about what we as a board think that we can do towards these things, and then sit there and say, okay, if we've got a bunch of important things in organizational viability or in academic success or wherever they are, then that's where we need to spend the time. We're sitting here trying to align our main resource, which is time, without having a common understanding as a board of what we, in each of these three areas, organizational viability, academic success, faithfulness to charter, what we as a board, not as a school, but as a board are going to do.
So Ken, that's a great point. I would throw two things out. One is, it's worthwhile getting some numbers out here because conceptually, at least, we have a sense of what these buckets are, and we should have a
We
sense
don't
of what.
even have agreement on what these buckets look like. As I said, we're sitting here talking about innovation being very important, and it is. But what is our role as a board in that?
So, I'll throw this out. Putting percentages here isn't necessarily important of what we view, it's how much time we as a board are going to spend on it.
Then I'm clear on that. What-
Okay, so if, I'll just throw this out. Generally, it's a good idea to start, just process-wise, with these numbers up here. We can tweak them afterwards as we start filling things in, because we just see they're not reasonable. So, are folks okay with these relative percentages of our time investment in these areas?
For the year.
From a conceptual perspective. We'll fill in what goes in what. You know, we have a general sense, but what goes in what, and then we may adjust. But folks okay with these numbers, or?
Yeah, let's
That's a starting
let's
point.
move.
Yeah, just for the moment.
I think
All
we
right.
actually might spend more
So,
time in
next is kind of going through the exercise of going through each item and figuring out which area it falls under. Who's,
Greg's
sure.
not doing it yet.
So do you mind,
You don't think so, Paul?
putting some space
It's not
under?
about the points, don't you?
Yeah, I was gonna do that.
Oh, wow, you're way ahead.
You guys weren't just hanging on my Excel, my formatted Excel?
Yes.
I know that, so board development, I do think we're gonna spend more than 5% of our time in board development. I mean, if you look at, we probably spend a quarter of the governance meeting talking about board development monthly, right? So if it's how we're spending our time,
Yeah.
and board development is very important for us to be successful as a board, I think we're gonna be spending more time. I wouldn't say it's more important than some of the other things,
Yeah.
but it's just as important, and I think our time commitment will be a little bit more than 5%.
I think that's a fair statement.
That's the
That's the clarification on the
That's the
time.
clarification, is that this isn't about what's important.
This is not.
Yeah, I think we should
And that's
rethink.
where, for example, I think, maybe I'm wrong, but innovation and dissemination, I feel like is very high, but I
Yeah.
think it's because you're valuing it as important, but that's not what the chart's about.
Right,
Yeah.
and our,
So
and we are not gonna be
time
spending
that
time.
the board is gonna spend
Yeah, we're not
on
spending.
innovation
on
and
time.
dissemination, to me, is, I don't even know what that number would be.
Yeah,
It's
but
our
it's not
job,
15.
school-based, to figure out how to be innovative and disseminate, not the board's
Yeah,
job.
and we're making sure we do
That
it.
we start to do that in a more structured
That's right.
manner.
So, but
So,
how much time then
But how
is
much
it,
time
not,
will it
not,
take?
So
not how much
let's
you
take
value
just
it.
a little bit of a process check first.
Yeah.
So we're at noon. It's
And
been
I'm
another 30 minutes here. I think at some point, by the time we leave, we want to have a list of things that we want to focus on this year. We have 6 things here that we think are important to invest time in. And I'm not derailing this. I think we can continue on. But
Well, this is gonna give you that list, right? Once we
Right.
start plugging
That's
things
right,
in,
yeah.
the top 3 or whatever, however much time we can possibly allocate to each one of those, let's say the 20 items under here, we only got 25%, we're gonna say, okay, we're only gonna do the top 5.
And I think we've all cleared our calendars until 1 o'clock. This
everybody's-
process takes time, you really can't short circuit it.
Everybody's okay? You've got to leave a little beforehand?
No, I'm all right.
Okay, all right. So everybody's okay to stay to 1? Okay, I don't want
I thought we were here till 2, so.
You're here to
to. Some of us woke up early.
And again, we can keep tweaking these as we go along, and that's part of this process, because it forces us to think, would we agree, maybe we want to flip these
I would
to
flip
5
those
and
for now.
15?
Yeah, flip.
So
From
let
the
me
board.
clarify, Rick, what you think the purpose. Do you think that just by plugging these 6 things into these 7 categories,
This and all those other items.
all those other items, do you think by plugging them into the categories, now we have prioritization?
No, you have them each in here, you need to prioritize them within that category,
Okay.
okay? And then you'll know what you want to spend your next year on.
And then when we want to articulate to the stakeholders, here's the board's priorities for the coming year.
Yep.
We still have to develop measures for what we think are most important to do for the coming year. So statements of what that is.
Yeah.
And I don't think we want to go back to them with 14 plus 6, 20 things.
So.
So there's some kind of, what are the top 5 or the top
Yeah.
7?
So I would throw this out. So what some organizations choose to do is they say, look, we as a board are focusing on these major areas. And within each one of these areas, this is our top priority or our top 2 priorities. And that's how you share what you're focused on.
Well, I think that I want to make sure we refine where we're headed. For the bottom 3, whatever they are there,
Yep.
I don't know that it's valuable to share with the
Yeah, you
community.
don't have to.
Okay. So whatever our top categories are in terms of investment percentage, and then whatever the actual specific initiatives are, we share those. Okay.
I mean, that's a matter of how you
And
want
we
to
hold
communicate
ourselves
it.
accountable. Well, it's important to think about that as we begin to get to the end of the year.
Well, we're also holding ourselves accountable so that,
Relative.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea is, it's 15%, then we're going to spend that much time, no more, no less.
Well, I think it's more, well, it's a variation on that, I think. It's that if we find that we are altering from the portfolio, we should have a discussion. Is this the
Makes
right,
sense.
given what facts we now know that we didn't know in January, does this still make sense? If the legal blows up,
We're gonna have to,
All right, it's a rebuttable presumption.
But it gives us guardrails to stay with.
Yes. I agree.
Okay. So next step is start, you have that huge list over there.
Why don't we do
and
this
list.
one first?
Yeah, the other, is
I'm
the
sorry?
other list more to inform the strategic
Yes.
planning? It's not really, I mean, I thought these are 2 separate lists in my mind because we haven't identified how we're gonna build a strategic plan, how we're gonna involve stakeholders. We're not the only ones that should be providing input to create what that will be. So I struggle with using that list to inform what we're gonna do in the next year.
I think we start with this list with the intent that this list that's up there is what are we going to really try to focus on over the next 12 months. Then let's revisit the strategic list, which has got a time horizon out further than 12 months, and see if there's anything that we should pull over to this list.
Yeah.
Or add strategic plan onto there and give it a 20%.
Yep.
I'd buy that.
So are we then agreeing that these 6 things get into one of these buckets?
And we just added this up.
Yeah.
So it's created another bucket combination.
I
We
would
only
propose
created
if you
another
want to,
bucket, we created another item on the list.
or if you want to keep the 6. Oh, you just said you didn't create another bucket?
Number
I
7.
don't think we're creating another bucket, I think we're creating another item over here that
Yes.
has to go into one of those
Yes,
buckets.
that's right.
So write it down, number 7, strategic plan. Your handwriting's not as neat as mine.
You warned us.
So I will say that number 1 goes into organizational viability, non-discretionary. I'm going to pick off the low-hanging
Yeah,
fruit.
so I just want to make sure, yes.
Yep. Back to what? Define.
And we have unanimity on
I don't know, do we? Is there unanimity?
We have what?
that.
Yeah,
Unanimity on that item.
that's why I picked it, I thought it was easy.
2 would go into
Marginal point of agreement.
I would think.
Yeah, so this is a very big, but can we break this out into,
That was really meant to be ED leadership, because that's the board piece. The school
Okay.
leadership was on the school side.
I say that goes into
okay, so,
organizational viability.
So it goes into organizational viability.
Well, is leadership hiring the ED?
Yeah, that's really what it is.
Then that's non-discretionary.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Really
Actually,
non-discretionary.
That's true.
Hiring needs.
Yeah, that's kind of non-discretionary. Yes, now that I know how to use it.
Hiring the ED.
So,
Is there something else in leadership that's not hiring the ED that we wanted to.
That would be the school part though, that'd be on the other half.
So the thing about hiring the ED is it might take a long time at once, but then once it's done, you're done.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why 10%.
That's why the 10%,
Yeah, right.
is like a lot of time the next 2 months.
All right, so that's.
So can I ask, is
That
Dawn,
10%'s gonna go up.
sorry,
Well, 10% will go up in February and March, but then it should be 0.
Well,
Right.
again, the point of putting the buckets out there, if I'm wrong, right, let's start kind of with a blank aspirational sheet. Now we're gonna put the things in there and we will revisit whether we got the percentages right. That's why
right.
we wanted us to do it in an iterative manner. So we don't need to challenge the percentages until we get to end the job,
Yeah, right.
seeing what's in the buckets.
So charter renewal would also go under non-discretionary, same under organizational viability.
Is it charter renewal or is it accountability plan?
Well, okay, accountability.
Accountability plan, but that's
And
also non-discretionary.
Yeah, so change, I think we're saying change number 3 to be accountability plan,
No.
because we've got our charter.
You're putting it in the right spot then.
It's in the right
Did
spot.
we get it right?
Did we get it?
Are we done? Do we have
We didn't get it.
Oh, sorry, are we?
What, charter renewal?
It's not been confirmed.
Yeah, we heard
We're in
that.
draft
Okay.
mode.
Yeah, we don't have it.
Oh,
So I'm
sorry.
just gonna not doing it for 3 years.
Yeah, we're not doing anything about it.
So we're not spending any time, but we do have to spend time taking
We don't have to, but you should just go.
Number 4 goes under faithfulness to charter.
I can't even read it.
or under faithfulness to charter?
Yep.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have sat over here, I can't see them.
Can't see.
No. They should be like-
5,
Faculty engagement,
I think, I thought we were
organizational
including
viability, discretionary.
stakeholder engagement with vision.
That's separate. There were 2 different.
But it's, from my perspective, it was all kinds of things, right? So it would be, making sure that they have more planning for academic success of students, that they have opportunities to be innovative and go out and disseminate.
No, that's the
So
school
we go-
part though, that's not the board part.
Thank you for
So again, that's a high priority with a low investment of our time.
Can we put number 6 and?
so just to confirm, number 5,
Where's number 5?
See, that's why we have problems with it too.
I didn't think we would do that.
I'm gonna skip number 5.
What, so I think number 5 would be in organizational liability, discretionary
Discretionary,
is where
right.
it
Yeah.
should
Right,
live.
right.
We did not get to your point, what we exactly meant by faculty engagement, because we were afraid of getting a little bit too involved in that area was a concern that you had raised there, but I think bucket belongs in this one.
Is the 6 belong there too?
6? I think so.
I would,
almost look
no,
at-
I would leave it go on the faithfulness of the charter.
Sits over there?
Transparency and visibility?
Disability.
I thought it was gonna go on board development. That's where I thought it was gonna go.
It does contribute to board development.
Yeah, that's a good
Figure out
place.
Okay,
that
that's
balance.
a good point.
Yeah.
6 and board development.
Okay.
You go, Tom.
I like that.
No, I don't think it goes there.
So it can go in, it can go in either one. I think the question is this just board development is just developing
I
us?
was feeling that board development was internal facing, where transparency and visibility is an outward facing aspect.
Part of that is improving the board's governance will help us, so that we're more transparent and more visible.
So where are you thinking, Roger? Faithfulness to the
Well, I
vision?
guess it's it could fall into organizational viability or faithfulness to charter.
I think
Because it's an external, I view it as an external engagement.
Yeah, I think it's how you define
Yeah,
board,
I don't-
board
Or you
development.
could split it half and half between.
the board
It- it
functions
is
better
yes.
if we figure out this faculty engagement thing, right?
I think
Does
it
anybody
doesn't
object
come
to
in
what
favor.
he just proposed, what Roger just proposed?
Pardon me?
Does anyone object to what Roger just proposed?
Yeah, I don't think it belongs to faithfulness of charter. I mean, you can be
Right.
transparent and visible and do a bad job at the charter, or you could do a good job at the charter and be invisible, so that's not really related.
It's about board
Right, so if
development.
you,
Up under 1.
I like it under board development, that's what we as a board need to.
me too, if you define board development as excellence of board members, then part of the excellence of board members is being transparent to our stakeholders.
Yeah,
So I would put it under board
yeah,
development.
it's not just about bringing new people in, but doing the best,
Right.
yeah.
Excellence of board members.
Yep.
Sure. I agree.
7, strategic planning.
Organization.
That's
Organizational viability.
faithfulness to charter.
I actually,
are we
I'm
looking
kind
at?
of on there.
Seven, strategic planning.
So, I would suggest that it goes under all three. No, I'm sorry. Organizational viability, there's a strong element of strategic planning in that. Academic success, if we're gonna sit here, for example, and support global programs or have a one-to-one initiative, that's gonna take strategic planning. And faithfulness to charter, if we're gonna sit here and take a vision and implement it.
So Ken,
that's
you're
gonna
really
take-
talking about strategic planning in all of these areas. Like strategic planning is too broad of a thing because everything involves strategic planning, right?
Yes.
So how about if we take college and career success, put it up with academic success, because that's, how successful we are here then in turn leads to college and career success. So I would just say student success. And that could have subcategories under it, at AMSA and beyond. And then maybe create a separate bucket as strategic planning. I don't know if that, does it go under, no?
So can I actually throw out a variation of what you're saying? Strategic planning, I think, to Ken's point, that there are aspects of it in a few of the areas. So org viability, this. So there are tasks associated with each of those buckets around strategic planning, and they're separate activities. Are they not? So I would argue that there's a 7 for each one of those.
Time devoted to strategic thinking, which is similar to but different from strategic planning, is something that I do think we probably need to budget for, because that's what we don't do when we get caught up in the weeds. So
But is it not?
I guess that's an argument for strategic planning as a separate,
I think it's an organizational viability.
forget it, let's not think out loud.
Isn't
I
it its
withdraw the
own
comment.
bucket?
No.
We should dedicate time separately for it?
The only reason you do strategic planning is so you'll have a viable organization in the long term.
Okay.
That's the only reason you do it.
Okay,
So if we're gonna have
I'll argue that point.
So actually, can I just say though, but yes, you do it for organizational viability, but are there strategic planning activities associated with organization viability,
Yes.
academic success?
Everything.
Well, not everything though, because I don't think well, maybe there is for some non-discretion, but college and career success, I don't know about faithfulness to charter, and innovation and dissemination, and even board
We
development.
need to start with your mission.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's that for that,
It's
but.
actually, this is.
Maybe if you split together, if you
So you can put,
make subtopics of them strategic planning and put those in the bucket.
yeah, so I'm just gonna leave the 7
So what
here,
is
and
strategic
there's
planning?
aspects of strategic planning for each of those buckets, right? So, disagree with me if I'm
It's a long-term
mistaken,
vision.
we're gonna do
We need
strategic,
a long-term vision for all of these things.
or that, or that, or that. I don't think that, we need for that, we need definitely here. And board development, I don't know if there's more strategic planning involved in board development per se.
I need an operational definition of strategic
Me
planning.
too.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe try this one out, create a strategic plan, 5-year plan.
You're not allowed to use the term in the definition.
Sorry. I knew there was a reason we had you.
That's basic vocab 101.
That's right.
So it's a long-term plan.
Well, then this president worked bills as well.
So strategic plan has to do with the major steps, the big rocks that you need to fit into the, if you're sitting here, you're sitting here packing for a trip. You're sitting here saying, well, I'm gonna have to, I've got clothes, I've got toiletries, I've got this. Then you get down into the tactical of what shirt am I gonna take? Am I gonna take 3 razors or 2, et cetera? Okay, strategic is that high level, big rocks planning that goes on. And it's an activity that supports every one of the goals. It's not a goal, it is an activity which supports.
I agree, Ken. It's not like we want to be strategic planned.
No.
It's not a goal.
We need to develop.
Yeah.
I think it's an activity.
I'm sorry?
I think it's an activity to create create the strategic plan versus a bucket? Are you
Yeah,
advocating that it's a bucket?
I think we're on the same page.
Yeah.
No,
No?
I'm saying it's permeates all.
Okay.
So, yeah, but it's an activity that's in each of the buckets, right? It's not a separate, it's not.
Yeah, but it's a separate activity though.
It's a separate act, I think
But-
it's a
but
separate
It's a
bucket.
task force you form to start,
But
gathering-
don't you want a
Different
strategic
definitions
plan
of
around
strategic plan.
organizational, I mean, the strategic planning here is different than the strategic planning here, right? And it's gonna be done by different folks potentially. So it should fall, I would argue.
And is there any problem with putting it in all buckets? Because then it's harder to create an actionable item in each bucket separately, because it has to hang together.
Is the goal of this exercise to determine how we want to spend our time in the
Yes.
next year? So
And prioritize.
from that perspective, I think we need to spend time on strategic planning, whether it's organizational viability or academic success. We need to spend time on that, and it might not actually be focused on academic success in this year. That might be, further down the road, maybe that's 2%, but we need to say, we're gonna set aside every meeting and talk about strategic planning.
So I'm hearing two different definitions
Yeah.
being bantered about here. And I think this is part of what Chris is asking for. So Craig is saying, there may be some utility if there's strategic planning going in all of these buckets for us to collect this up as one larger unit and create a strategic plan which then supports our vision. Okay, so we have a vision. This is what we want to be. We have a strategic plan. Here are the big rocks that we have to carry along in order to do that. That is create a strategic plan. I'm reacting to the fact that it says strategic planning there, not create a strategic plan.
Yeah.
Because strategic planning fits in every one of those buckets. Collecting that up into a larger
Yeah.
strategic plan might be a single product that we,
Yeah.
does that
Create
help
a
in terms
strategic
of
I like that,
definition?
Okay.
I think
So-
that one of the things that we
Yes,
tend to do
that's-
is we get caught up in the day-to-day, and we have not really had a good chance to think about a long-term, and that's what the strategic plan is, right? Am I right there?
So strategic plan, largely, when you're looking at the big rocks, if you will, they are long-term, but they're not just long-term. You're carrying things out in the short term that is part of your strategic plan as
Right,
well.
but what I'm hearing from Melissa is that at our board meetings, we don't dedicate time for a long-term vision,
Yeah.
and that we just get sucked up with all of our time in just keeping our head above water.
You're saying long-term vision. There is a difference between long-term and high-level importance, the big rocks, okay? And all I was suggesting is those big rocks that are important tend to also be long-term, but don't equate strategic with long-term. It has to do with the higher level, big buckets of activities
Is
that you
everyone
need to do.
familiar with the big rocks metaphor?
I don't know.
So,
So create a
So-
strategic
so-
plan, is that then under
Foundation.
faithfulness to charter more, because of what you're talking about is something?
So the reason why I use the packing thing is because when you create a strategic plan to go on a vacation, okay, there's a strategic plan of the big things that you need to pack. The carrying out of that is going to be in the long term, certainly. But your strategic plan is, okay, I've got ski equipment, yes. I got clothes, yes. I've got toiletries, yes. I've got books. You then go and make the tactical decision of what clothes, what books, which set of skis, et cetera, that I'm going to take. Okay?
It's like creating an outline.
It is.
Your
It
big
is
Roman numerals and
exactly
your
that.
details. Okay.
It is that. It is that outline then guides not only the longer term development, but what you're doing all along the way.
So what actually are we, so what is the recommendation? That we create a strategic plan?
I have a question.
Actually,
Can I just ask my question? Are we already have a task force, right, for this? Aren't we talking about the time that task force would be to present the?
Could be, if the
Yes.
task force, if we as a board decide that that is something that the task force is going to do, I think we all have to be open to the fact that this may be something that the larger board has a role in doing as well.
So I would suggest that we call this thing, create a strategic plan.
So,
Only,
it's number 8. So let me just throw this up. So there's strategic planning, let's create a strategic plan. And 7 is a task that's done in many of these buckets.
okay.
8 is another task that may belong in just one of these buckets. Or it's its own bucket, but I'd argue, I think we may be able to fit it into an existing bucket. Is that fair? So where would it fit?
Organization liability.
Create, I'll put the word create.
Oh, that was
Yeah,
the
it's
charter.
right,
That's my
it creates
number
I
7.
would put down under faithfulness to the charter.
What's that?
I would put it-
down on vision and mission requirement.
I think the argument is without a strategic plan, we're doomed. So
No,
it's fine.
not necessarily.
That's the argument. That's the argument for putting in that liability.
I would put on the faithfulness to the charter.
That's where I'd put it.
And the argument there would be that you talked about the visioning process as being part of the faithfulness to the charter.
Yes.
And so does creating a strategic plan go along with that? I'm not advocating
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
I'm just,
It follows up. It
I
follows
think that
up.
makes logical sense. I mean, it benefits this, obviously,
Yeah, it
but,
benefits us.
but it, as an allocation, it's all in that bucket.
it helps support the 25%.
Okay, I think I got all those then. So we put 7 in the right areas, and we've got create a strategic plan under faithfulness to charter. Okay? So we got our buckets and we got our initiatives in them.
So now, I think to Rick's point, now we kind of stare at the length of the list that are in each of the buckets, and we reconsider the allocation that we made at this point in time.
Allocation, and then also, yes, we want to do that, and then we want to prioritize within that bucket, based on how much time we've got overall to be able to spend on it. Can we actually do it? Or where's the priority?
And does time mean individually, like for example, those of us who've been assigned to one task force or one board or one committee, how do we,
Full
Part of
board.
the full board.
Full board, so you may be spending 100% of your time
Yeah.
on 2 things. Yeah, you probably are.
So do we,
How many members do we have?
13,
Yeah,
really?
but it's
12.
full board.
Yeah.
I think organizational liability, non-discretionary, should be increased a little bit.
You think I underestimated?
Well, I wasn't considering the accountability plan and hiring the ED all as part of it. I was considering just that first number 1, so I think we should be 15.
But the accountability plan, are we looking at that, reviewing that, or are we
Yeah, we
creating?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's,
Yes.
But the-
School does most of it.
right.
We
So,
review it.
Same
We don't
with,
create it.
And we put the ED search.
But we put the ED
You
search
put the
in
ED
there.
search in there, so to assume that's only gonna be 10% is bad.
At least to 15, if not 20.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's for the year, so.
yeah, for the.
For this year, I would suggest that number 20.
Because I think it's not only, hiring the ED, it's what comes after.
Yeah.
When you say what comes afterwards.
There's
Well,
still-
goals for the ED,
But that's-
all
Well,
that.
it will be more,
Right,
more
right,
expensive
right.
the first year to
Right.
create goals for the permanent ED than
Right.
for following years.
Right, right. Just a time allocation.
It will decrease after that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do we
This
think
is through
we've overdone
December, right?
because we need to
Yes, through
start pulling
December.
10% out elsewhere, as well as any other adjustments?
They're up on the board there too.
What's that?
They're up there, the percentages.
Oh, I can't see that either.
Can't see that?
Get my eyes checked.
Did you increase the size?
Yeah, well, just there's the charts.
Chart is beautiful.
Charts.
Yeah, it is very.
What would the board do for college and career success
This year.
this year? I just don't know.
A strategic plan.
Isn't it?
so I think you ought to take something out of innovation and dissemination, because I don't see that being 15%.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I thought we split those, we
No.
reversed those, right? Yeah, that's 5 and.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
it should
that's
be
5,
5.
15.
That's 5.
Yes,
Then I don't know, the college and career success, we've talked about it in the past, but a lot of that is driven by the administration, but it's have those discussions consistently. So that is something as I would consider the ed committee, we talk about numbers. Where are we
So
talking?
wait, we need to take out 10%?
What's in organizational viability discretionary? What's in that?
Faculty engagement.
So is that 25%? Is that really 1/4 of the board's time?
Greg felt
Yes.
pretty passionately that it should be 50% of the board's time, so.
It's the single most important thing we do in the next 6 months is figure out, how we can contribute to a happier faculty.
So that's
We're going
time
to spend,
spent-
as a board, 50%
I
of
would
our time
challenge us
doing
to do
faculty
I
engagement.
would challenge us to work with Marianne and figure out how we can contribute 25% of our time.
I agree with whoever, I'm sorry, the college and career success, I think that should just be folded into academic success. I don't know why it needs a separate 5%. As what we're doing as a board.
So,
I think it really does, because it really goes to some of those workforce things that thinking longer
Right.
picture, longer term rather than shorter term, but I do think that the academic success is probably too high then.
Yeah, but
Because-
isn't,
I think it's
isn't the
subset.
college and career about our ability to give them academic success now? I mean, we can't control
No.
what happens
No.
later.
No.
Academic
it's
success
not.
is
But
about
we
our
can't really
MCAS
key
scores,
the-
our
Right.
AP scores today is what academic success is in my mind. College and career success is some of the things that Pauline was
Yeah.
talking about collaboration, being able to learn in an information, world.
It's what we're
So here's the
Preparedness
well, no,
and readiness,
here's the
yeah.
difference, is that was one of the things that I mentioned in the thing, is it's interesting, because what you just said tells me how you define success. And we're, and really it's about how you just measured it, and you're equating success with MCAS, SAT, and AP scores. I would argue straight out of the gate that success, including academic and college and career, includes the 21st century skills of collaboration and cooperation. We may not have nationally based normed ways of measuring them, although the park is supposed to be helping to do that, but it doesn't still, just because we're not doing an effective job of measuring it, doesn't mean, I feel, that it's not something that still falls under academics.
I see.
So
Yeah.
for purposes of our retention,
We broke the box into 2 boxes, so I was happy with it as 1 box.
Well, that's what we're trying to argue.
That's
is to
what
put
I
it
was
back into
saying. I
one.
think it
That's
should
what
be
we're
one
trying to say.
and I would argue against that. I think we should change the numbers, but I do think that the college and career deserves separate attention at the board level, because it's not generally part of academic success enough in the mainstream, and certainly not in the history of this institution.
Yes, we in the past, we have been very, very focused on what is our MCAS numbers, what is our AP numbers, how many people have taken AP classes, and we have had very little, if any, discussion about what have our students done once they reach college. We have been,
And
I have to challenge everyone because Dr. DeMello started this presentation with the state of the school, and one of the things she said was, how do we change? What is achievement? And part of achievement might be that I'm able to collaborate, I'm able to communicate, I'm able to work within groups. And I think we need to begin to define those aspects as part of our academic success, so we can have the same vocabulary.
And I'd also say that the new assessments that are coming out, such as PARC or whatever next generation tests come out, that will then replace the MCAS that you're now, heavily referencing, will be changing. And those are based on the Common Core, and the Common Core is all about college and career readiness. That's how the Common Core has been designed. So it goes to that, unless you're specifically trying to reference something different by what you mean by college and career.
I think, well, actually, I think we're trying to solve the wrong problem. The real problem is our numbers add up to over 100%.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, well, there.
That would
And
be
so
one
I
of
would
the
say,
reasons.
let's lower academic success
Yeah.
to 10%.
Yeah.
Really, what do we do?
I
We
would-
get
I would
reports and
put-
then we get feedback.
College and career, 1%, as a board. I mean, how much time do we spend as a board?
Not enough.
But you said making connections with the community. I didn't mean to speak out loud, but that's what you guys talked about, was
Right.
getting with universities. And what you said is that although these kids get great grades, they don't perform well later
But
in
that-
college.
I don't
So
think that's in that box, right? You put that in another box.
In career success, we talked about experiential, learning through hooking up with Bose, hooking up with EMC and places like that. Those were some of the things that were in that college and career success.
And that's where you
Was it
develop
in
the
that?
soft
I thought it
skills.
was in
No,
another one.
no, but here's this is where the distinction, I don't have it, I call that, from my perspective, that is academic success.
I agree.
It's
I
just,
get what- I
it's
get what
part of
you're
our
saying.
academic success is to make sure the kids are college and career ready.
Mhm.
And that includes creating partnerships. That's why I just personally see them in one bucket.
Again,
So
the
it's
problem, the
not-
main problem is not the number of buckets, the main problem is the.
Okay, so we're talking, so if I could just throw this out, so two things. One is, question is, should we have this as a separate bucket? I'd like to argue that we should, at least for the time being, because most people don't, even though you may be viewing it that way, most of us don't, and we need to be very
Change
aware
our
of it and
vocabulary,
keep focusing on it, even though it may be a small number.
Why don't we
I have one
suggest
question.
change the
As a board.
category?
What's that?
We call academic success, let's see, up to 12th grade or 6th to 12th academic success.
We'll call it, yeah, or AMSA
Because
success.
it's confusing with the other category.
So,
I actually think, coming back to, Renee, is what Scott was saying earlier, it's actually how much time are we spending being ambassadors of the school with the community, with that's, I think, where we can provide time, right? Finding partnerships with universities, with businesses. That's where I think we can dedicate time. I'm speaking for you, but I don't know.
No, yeah, to kind of take that a step further too, I think where I'm kind of getting lost is I might have what we were just talking about in a different category, like building relationships with universities and industry. I wouldn't put that in college and career success. I might have that in a different category. And I think that is what's kind of skewing what's going on. Maybe, well,
If we just take faithfulness to the charter down to 20%, we've got 100%, we're good to go.
Yeah, that's good.
But what
That's gonna help
Scott's
us
talking
really
about though,
done
and that's,
with
that's
Further
important,
definition.
Yeah.
is that, what I'm hearing from what Scott's talking about, that building those relationships is largely a board function, and it is very time consuming.
yes.
Is that it takes hours to get a meeting, and then it takes hours to have the meeting, and then it takes time to communicate what happened. So, and now, that ambassadorial function, I don't know where it goes up there.
Innovation and dissemination.
So we've got 100%, and I think that, to me, it feels like, given what I have suggested, and some of you have agreed, that we need to send the message loud and clear to the school. And we need to remind ourselves that the most important thing we can do this year is invest in discretionary organizational viability in terms of figuring out with Mary Ann how we can help to get through the cultural problems.
Well, that's two different things. One is what's most important, and the other is we're just going to quarter of our time on, which are similar but different.
They might be different, right? I agree.
It's important, but will we actually spend 25% of our time?
Well, we're determining that we will. That's a decision that we're making.
So are we trying to
And that means we'll
determine which
neglect
one,
other things in order to do that.
which one is a better way for the board to spend our time? Is improving faculty engagement or building relationships with
Community,
That's what we're
as an
fundamentally.
example.
Right.
And I would say, if we have an extra hour in the week, we ought to be trying to figure out how to spend time helping the school internally.
in a short term.
This
In
year.
the short term, in the short term.
Yeah, okay.
I'm looking.
It's not really our job, right? And
Right.
we
We could
get
get-
threatened in getting into operations. There's got to be more that we can do.
I think if we could envision what things we could do, I could,
Let's invent them and make sure Mary Ann agrees that there's something that is
But
valuable
I-
and doesn't cross the
but I
line.
think there's so many other valuable things we could be doing that we could be setting ourselves in a trap.
No, but the example is, we have spent a lot of time doing that. Everything with the ED search, the hours and hours and hours that Mike Glass spent, that's in there, right?
The
It's all
ED
that.
search
This is
is,
moving
to
forward.
me, is not that. That is
Around
organizational
that's
liability,
non-discretionary.
non-discretionary.
Oh, God, I have such an issue with that.
Because we need,
This is
we
like-
absolutely must hire an
This
ED.
is the
Right.
problem.
That's not discretionary.
We all have different,
Yeah.
where we think things belong, and so,
So they're not fully
The
defined.
categories aren't
Right.
defined well enough.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
that's where, even when I go back to this college and career thing, to getting an understanding, I'm not looking to belabor, but for me, moving forward, and as we start to talk about strategic planning, all of those things, it is important that we have common definitions. And so your
Yeah.
college and career success has started to, from what I'm hearing, morphed into things like partnerships and stuff, which is completely different. And academic success,
I don't think that's true, Marion.
okay, and that's how
Oh,
I was
no,
kind of
no, I
starting
think
to
it is.
hear
I
it from
agree.
your
So we disagree on that.
But
Yeah,
see, that's what I
exactly.
go back to,
I don't-
our definitions aren't,
So-
we don't
so
have
let me-
common
let-
standards.
let
I
me-
agree with Marion, that's
Let's,
how I see
let's,
myself
let's
as an
agree to
educator.
do this, is that, you know, before we would ever go public with this, we need to have, you know, definitions for each one of these categories that don't include the word themselves, otherwise it'd be programmed.
Otherwise, I'm gonna get my red pen out.
You're gonna get it. But, so we need the board, somebody on the board, two people, to create short definitions about what all these categories mean. And then we can check ourselves to see if we have, you know, the activities in the right one.
So can I throw
So
one
we're not done
Amsacs
until we
as
do
well?
that, but we're not gonna do that in session. We need that to happen between now and the next couple of weeks.
And Craig, can I just mention, one thing that would really help that exercise is that other list of items you have,
Yeah,
those 26 or whatever, those priorities.
yeah.
If you can map them to the buckets, it helps drive focusing what is the real definition.
Tests
and get-
the
yeah,
definition,
Exactly. And if I could just share, see, actually, that's one of the reasons this is such an important activity. In terms of, it makes sure we ultimately, it doesn't happen the first time through, you gotta iterate
It's
through
not
this.
supposed to be.
Ultimately, we all agree on priorities, we agree how we wanna spend our time, and we agree on what is what.
So,
Okay, so the fundraising committee. Can we go back to the graph?
Hi, Chair.
So we have a standing committee that spends, you know, an hour and a half a month plus time outside, so probably 15, 20 person hours a month on raising money. Where does that fit?
That's organizational viability discretionary.
Okay.
I have an
So that is
idea.
in there.
And that's where a lot of corporate, see, that's where I come from with the corporate relations.
I have an idea. If we took each committee and put it into each category, that might help us decide.
and some committees may span.
Right. But that way I can actually kind of focus, okay, if educational committee is spending, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think that might help, maybe not.
So, Rick, you've inserted in here, very craftily, a very high-value activity that doesn't get done today. I think we need to agree that this isn't done today. But I do think we have 30 minutes left or so, and I do think the board needs to be prepared at some point to articulate this year's goals. And that's 5 or 10 statements about what we're trying to do and key measures so that we can measure ourselves. And so the question is, how do we do that in the next 30 minutes? At least get enough so that myself or Pauline or others can take it off, flesh them out the rest of the way, and bring them back to our February meeting where we can spend a reasonable amount of time going through them and then vote on them. Because I do think we want to get these done by the end of February. So I think we started with a list of 8 that we thought this is where we need to spend our time. And we were going to kind of take a vote on which were the most important. And we could agree that all 8 of those things, those tactical things, if you will, are places where we want to spend our time. But we don't really have very specific things about each one of them. And we don't have an idea of which ones that we want to articulate to the stakeholders that this is what we're going to be doing.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The accountability plan, is the board involved in that?
Some.
Some? Is there like a task force or?
No, it's done largely by the administration. I think Sarah does probably the lion's share of that. Is that right? And then Barry. So she facilitates the whole process. It comes back to, I think I have to sign it, but the board doesn't take a look at it, and we're all hesitant with that.
You've shared it. I think you've shared it in the past before you signed it, I think.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
I think we've
Well, the annual plan is
coach have more of a role
Yeah, so
than
it
have in the past. But
should be on there. I agree.
I can send the guidance to you all. See what that is.
So, anybody have any good ideas about how we get to a discrete set of annual goals?
So Craig, can I just ask you one question?
Yes.
the item before where we were talking about what might we accomplish in the current year and the longer term priorities, did we wrap on that? Because that, we have kind of what those are, what our areas of focus are, and how much time we want to spend on them. Are we going to be able to do all that? I don't know if we closed on the last item.
Right, so you're saying,
So it
Otherwise,
says
we're
what-
just wasting a lot of time.
Yeah, right. So I just want to make sure we close it. I know we have a
no,
takeaway
I'm
from
not
this.
trying to abandon it, I'm trying to say, how do we, close on that and get to, a place where we feel comfortable, we can come back in February with the list.
Why not vote? Why not have people go up and, vote 3 times?
What are the most important things on that list for the board to do?
Yeah.
And some of them are a little, not that well defined, so they're not discrete tests like strategic planning as an
Yeah, I don't
example.
think we can do it
Yeah.
that way. I mean, the problem I have is I don't have an alternate solution, but I think that voting on the 3, because we've done the allocation, so the allocation kind of gives us an idea, so we kind of need to drill down to what to do.
For
The
each of
3
those
kind of gives us the
8
allocation.
things.
Yeah.
So if we go back, that list we had of maybe 18 or 20 items on the spreadsheet there, which I know we said was sort of strategic planning, but some of those things are probably items that we want to put focus on over the next 12 months, which could potentially turn into our goals for 2014. And if we voted on that list, each of us had 3 that we wanted to pick, see where that came out, then that might take us a step closer to, okay, which ones of these are executable over the next 12 months that we feel are enough high priority that we want to make them a 2014 goal. The other thing would be, and I don't know if there's another cut at that list of 18, which is if we wanted to affinitize those, are there some like items up there that we would then combine? So maybe it's not 18, but it's a shorter list. So just a thought.
I think some of these things don't have anything to do with the year's priorities, though. And some of the year's priorities may not be on that list.
Well, that could be, this may be a part of it. Maybe there's some that we add to that.
So I would make a recommendation. I think the 8 that are there could probably be consolidated a little bit, but those are the priorities that we identified at the beginning of the meeting that are things that we have to address this year. And then if we begin by building goals off of that, and historically I knew the governance committee has kind of taken that role to draft the first draft of goals, and then we can present that at the next board meeting and see if there's anything we need to add or modify. My recommendation would be begin where we have, or that other sheet that you have that's bucketed, that we bucket them into the 6 buckets. But really, those 8 items are the things that we defined already as a priority for this year.
I think, though, that what we said is that things that have to be done this year are above the line.
Yeah. We don't.
I think. We don't have any choice about our legal work, nor hiring DED and trying to make that successful, even beyond that. The charter, those things we have to do.
Well, that's where I like Ev's idea of taking a look at these ones on the right, so that if we do see important things there to do.
Well, I think, somebody, I'm happy to take all of these and get them into a chart like this, which I would envision that, the chart at the top has the stuff that we've talked about today specifically, and then at the bottom has one of these 18 in it. So we see things that we identified today, and then things that we also thought were more strategic. So I think we can map those pretty easily. I don't know if we need to do it today.
But
Because
how-
they are pretty mappable.
How can we leave here with goals without doing that now?
Well, these are 5-year things. Is what we, when we nominated these
Okay.
are.
And the
None of
purpose
these
of
make it.
making that list was just to mutually educate.
It was really not to incorporate today. These are suggestions.
Right, it's not this.
And we didn't debate them. These were just a bunch of brainstorming ideas. Right? So I think.
So correct, the one thing that I would say we should do with the list of 18 is what we did with strategic planning. We just quickly scan down that list and see if there's anything on that 18 that needs to be pulled forward to this year. That would be my only suggestion of what we do with the 18 for today.
Okay. So look, before we do that, and I think we ought to do that here. I don't think we need to work on these in this
Right.
meeting.
Right.
These are gonna be pretty easy for any one of us to kind of write a little bit of a statement, which is our annual goal in this case. We've said that vision and mission get into this bucket, so a pretty big piece of our work. I think that's something that we can certainly articulate.
So I'll volunteer to take a stab at that.
Okay,
Tom,
at a goal area there. Faculty
Write a goal
engagement, I
for
would
write
like
it up,
to,
yeah.
Write a goal.
I would like to suggest that Mary Ann, a couple members of the board, and Jessica get together and talk about some ideas here around faculty engagement. What can the board do to help us get to where can we contribute labor to make this a better place?
So you want to come up with some goals
For the board,
for the board under number 5?
I think that I think we need the faculty's
Yeah.
perspective, because some of our thoughts may be very unwelcome, and Mary Ann might think they cross the line. I think you two need to be involved in that conversation.
I would recommend Rick be involved in that.
Rick from the cultural task force.
And Craig, I think you're very passionate about this, and I think you should be involved.
So it's my fault. Okay.
Well, I think you have
Yeah.
some very specific opinions, and
So let's,
I think you have to be in the conversation.
the four of us get together, and Jessica, I'd like to ask you to invite another faculty member,
All right.
and I can talk to you about that afterwards.
Okay, I'm down with that.
Okay, so I think we can.
Can we take everybody else step? Can we agree, or maybe afterwards, let's just agree how we set up the first meeting? And who's going to drive? Yeah, for-
In the next 2 weeks, I guess.
Before we take up, let's just,
Before we leave, let's figure out
Yeah.
maybe a date.
it's hard to get everybody.
So we have assignments. These, Pauline and I can take a stab at these. This one is going to be Ken and who?
Tom,
Ken and
I'm going to
Tom.
volunteer Tom.
Careful what you wish for.
Okay.
I need an older person's perspective on this.
He just threw down. Oh.
A little bit more tenure.
Hey, I got enough
Gray
weight
hair.
here. I got enough weight here, I could say that.
Okay. So then, transparency and visibility. This was a goal last year. We agreed that it was partially met. I think a fresh set of eyes on what might be some additional engagement here, as well as driving forward our ability to engage people into the board meetings through content, maybe even forum.
Old set of eyes and new
Chris?
set of eyes.
Who else?
Not by myself.
I
You
was
are
hoping
putting
you'd
down
volunteer
the
with us.
No, I said not by myself.
Oh,
The two of us.
Chris and Melissa.
Is that the right spelling? You can never spell Melissa.
Yeah,
Okay.
one L, two S's.
And then do we need to, for these last two,
Well, you already have a task force, right?
we have a task force.
I think we just need to set some, we're gonna meet quarterly, we're gonna talk about it every meeting. We just have to set some goals, like we did the last time. They weren't, I mean, they were achievable, but let's set some goals around it.
So, last year we had put out an alert now which said, here's our goals. And I don't know how that was received, but that's what we did, and we posted them on the website. We can certainly do exactly the same thing. You know, it's good when that's kind of one page and it's not 5 pages, but it's something that people will actually read on their handout or whatever. Do we think that it would be useful in that same breath to talk about what we think we achieved last year or partially achieved? Or is that something for the board meeting to review and make part of the record?
In our rep update.
You're not going to fit it on one screen.
I'm just trying to make sure, what I'm trying to figure out is how do we, as a board, communicate with the constituents, to some progress we've made, but not to toot our own horn. Also to recognize that there's a lot more work to be done, and some of these are carryovers, as we've suggested.
Maybe we publish a separate report card
Yeah.
for ourselves on our last year's goals.
We
Put it on the
create a
website.
report card at this meeting, and we can just share that, even if we were to learn now or putting it on the website. I mean, this is a public meeting, so
Yeah,
we,
yeah.
I don't know that we need to redo that exercise.
No, when the exercise is done, I'm just trying to figure out what people want to know.
So, the bot update that we sent out in October, there's another one due to go out in February. We can reference some of the discussions that we had and where the information lies in the minutes,
That's the parent newsletter
parents and faculty.
and faculty
State.
newsletter. Okay, yeah,
So-
that's a great place to put it, or at least reference it. I think we can certainly reference in the one pager that we looked at how we did last year, link to the website as a document.
Yeah, why not put how we did last year on the website?
Yeah, link to it and the
And then
goals
link
for
to
the
it
coming.
from wherever.
Okay. Okay.
And the board now would go to both faculty and staff.
Who's there?
And parents.
And, well, sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? So I think we'd like to try to get all the people that have assignments, if in the next 2 weeks you can come up with it, we can get it assembled. I think we need to get it out to the board before we meet in February, so the board has a couple days to look at it. So when we come back,
I think the governance committee meeting should be.
Could we have it by governance, February 9th?
I think that would be what our objective should
That'd
be.
be perfect.
that's
A week and a half, but.
Uh-huh.
a week and a half. Yeah, I mean,
It's a couple sentences on each.
It's a couple
topic.
sentences.
Yeah.
okay, all right, we'll try to, that's our objective, is to get them into governance committee, so you guys can finish up the formatting,
Yeah.
philosophy, and get it to the rules. Okay.
What did we agree on the 7 and 8? We do have a task force for that.
Yeah, so we agreed to task force with, take a step, is that right? Yeah.
Who's that? That's a good idea.
Task force is Pauline, Chris, and I. Okay, so anything else about the annual meeting portion? We just need to do a little bit of agenda for next month. Do we,
I just want to be
anything
clear
else?
on what we're doing. Like, is it a goal that we're writing, like with the metrics, or is it the just wording on the top line?
It has to be the goal and the metrics. The
Goal,
draft, the
goal,
goal
and
and the metrics, so
Yeah.
that the governance committee meeting
Yeah.
can kind of
To put it on
form,
form.
merge, do all of those wonderful things with that.
And then, I think there's some more work that needs to be done on the model, which is like a
Yeah.
clear definition for all the categories, kind of 2 or 3 sentences which define what a category or bucket means. Which, I'm happy to draft that and get it back out, and then we need to map all of the longer-term strategic ideas we had into those categories, which is pretty easy, I think. You want to work together on that? I
Sure.
don't think it's a lot of work to get a
It
draft.
should be
to the
pretty
board.
quick and then
Yeah.
up and provided feedback.
Does anybody else want to help with that, or are you guys comfortable?
Comfortable that I have enough to do.
You're not going to raise your hand anymore. All right, so are there, let's just take agenda items for next month. And I do think that, some of the feedback we got from somebody, I forgot, but it's, parents and faculty, they may be a little scared off by coming to board meetings. One of the reasons they might be is because they end up going 2.5 hours. And people don't want to be showing up and then walking out in the middle. So I think we want to get to a place as a board that we're tackling the most important things, and tabling the rest until a future month. And it seems like an hour and a half to 2 hours is, we need to try to figure out how to get to that time frame.
I think that's a difficult challenge because we have so many things going on. I think
It is,
that we can,
yeah.
I think that part of it logistically, we can work toward the timekeeper aspect and, we go over time, push it to the bottom of the agenda so that we get to everything on the board or something. But we just have a whole lot going on that we need to get through. And
Yeah.
I don't think that shortening the board meeting will allow us to get through the things we have to get through.
Okay.
And if we keep tabling stuff, then it just
Right.
snowballs.
Yeah, it just snowballs.
So I do agree with that, though. I think if we can figure out a way to, but to your the consideration you're making, that if some folks are not coming because they do run so long, anything we can do to try to fit as close as possible would be helpful, because I think sometimes an individual may start sharing information, they don't have to, they'll go over, there may not be as
Yeah, I think we just need
rigorous.
better discipline ourselves.
No doubt, we need to cover as much as we can, but if we can add more discipline.
We need to agree to an end time.
What's that?
We need to agree to an end time. I've never been aware of an end time for board meetings. I know when they start.
Yeah.
So I don't know though how.
I think they should be as long as they need to be. We should put the agenda together, we should have an objective for what it's gonna be, we should have a healthy discussion about it and go from there. And if somebody doesn't wanna make the investment in it, I don't value their opinion very much if they can't make the investment in staying an extra 15 minutes, if that's what's driving them away.
So I agree.
Yeah, it's
I agree. I
2.5
mean,
hours.
I think there are things that you can do with ordering of topics to sort of put things that parents or other stakeholders that come to the meeting, that's at the beginning. But I agree with Tom. I mean, I think,
Well, the work is the work.
Yeah,
I
the work is
totally
the work.
agree, but.
Our agendas already have time limits, so could we say, can we add them all up and then just say, and then just add like 15 minutes of wiggle room and then just say the meeting will end at, 8:45 or whatever our time limits add up to?
Yeah, no, I think.
And then during the meeting, we have to be disciplined, like you said, say, all right, we've allotted 15 minutes for this and we're already at 10.
But there's a balance to
Yeah.
be struck between having a board discussion, and now that the board is larger, that discussion is going to take longer.
Yeah,
Of
If we
having
stopped
it as
52 minutes ago, we would not have been in a good place.
So also I'm
If we had
advocating,
stopped 52 minutes ago, we would not be in a good place. We were flexible today, and I don't think.
yeah, I'm not advocating a very, very hard line, but I think as a board, we just need to try to work together to create more discipline to move through things more quickly and on time.
Yeah,
And
to
that
that
has to
point,
do-
Craig, I
and
mean,
let me say,
so
Craig, that
now
has
we're
to do
gonna
with the discussion that Pauline and I were having about Robert's Rules of Order.
Yeah.
We'll look into that a little bit
Yeah,
more,
we
because a lot of times if we have the discussion and there's a way to move it towards a vote or not.
Yeah, there's procedures that we have to.
Procedural.
Go ahead, Rick.
I would just add, to that point, if folks have time allocated before the meeting, they should see if they can make that amount of time. If they need more time, plan on it ahead, and get more time on the agenda, but they should do whatever they can to hit that time, and we have some wiggle room.
All right.
I'm not saying we should cut things short, but we should be more disciplined or rigorous around it. It's just good practice.
So does anybody have items for February's board meeting?
The next iteration of this exercise.
Yes, yeah.
We have,
New courses? New course approval?
Actually, yes, of course.
So what was that?
New course approval?
Oh,
that's just an.
It'll come via the ed.
Yes.
Yes.
Is that part of?
Ed committee report out.
Okay.
We had two items that we have deferred, which were the OML presentation and the board self-assessment. So we're supposed to give me their board self-assessment sheets, and then I will report
So
out.
report out on board self-assessment and OML?
Oh, no, yes, okay.
I'll be ready to, if we want to do it in February, to present some options for a third party survey
Okay. For faculty?
for all
Stakeholders.
Okay.
I'm
Is
looking
that
at.
something we want to run through the committee first, or do we?
Oh,
No,
yeah.
that was always,
complaint.
there was no committee.
That's true.
Yeah, that was no committee.
It was just me.
Okay, anything else?
Report out on the complaint, on our complaints.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's.
and then just an update from the administration and board on climate.
I was going to say, I look at my notes from the other meeting, but
Okay.
we had promised we would try to do a monthly update of where we're
Okay.
at.
All right, anything else?
Update of, sorry? You said nothing. Update of what administration's doing to respond to the recommendations from Diana Hampshire Board.
Do we also have the split of?
Yeah, it's part of it.
Is that part of it? We had set a task to split the climate
Yes.
Board
items
versus
between the board
administration.
versus
Yeah.
administration versus
That's
both.
part of it.
Yes.
Is that part of that?
Yes. So we're going to have all three.
I had a next iteration of the exercise, course approval, and what was after that one?
OML and board self-assessment? Okay. Anything else for business for tonight? All right, is there a motion to adjourn? Chris?
Second.
And Melissa seconds. Chris, All in favor? All opposed? Thank you all for coming.
Phenomenal time.
Yeah.
Everybody hand me your board self-assessment.
Do you need names on this?
No, but I need to know that I'm not.
If anybody is not doing anything tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. at the
Do we have them
WGBH
to-
studios in Boston, you can come watch the Quiz Bowl tape an episode of High School Roadshow.
Is it on TV?
No.
It will be on, the episode that we taped today will be on February 7th at 6 p.m.
So who did we beat today?
That cannot go out on social media, so I can't release that. But we are taping another episode tomorrow.
I guess you made it through to the next one.
6
Since we
p.m.
already adjourned the meeting, can you go back and erase that?
But they were awesome.
Oh, yeah, yeah.